birth date is September 24th, 1949. Relationship is grandmother.
Sandy Cornelli.
Birthday.
Birthday is 6/30/42, which makes me 81, going on 82.
Grandma.
And today is the 4th of April,
Okay.
2024.
Grandfather.
I'm the grandfather.
Yes, there we go.
Okay. Perfect. Let's see. I just lost the questions for. Well, I guess you can just start with like, if there's anything you like, anything. Okay, there we go. I found the questions. I was gonna say where'd they go.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
I remember that once the Russians had the nuclear bomb after World War II,
Mm-hmm.
it was a real issue. There was always a fear factor.
Mm-hmm.
In elementary school, we'd have drills. You'd get on the floor and sit under your desk like that was going to protect you from a nuclear
Mhm.
bomb, but that's
Yeah.
what they did. And, we didn't have news on TV then like we do now.
Mhm.
News was more in the newspaper, and how many kids read the newspaper, But the first thing that I really remember is the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Mm-hmm.
which was probably about, I think it was 1963, so I would have been about 12. And my family used to go to Key West a lot.
Mhm.
And so we had been there a couple years in a row at Christmas time. And that year, which I think would have been 63, and that was a real thing that the Russians might actually
Mm-hmm.
shoot something at us. Because Key West is only, 80 miles
Yeah, it's pretty
offshore or
close.
whatever. And they were trying to put these nuclear missiles in Havana, Cuba, which is
It's close.
close. So that year, I think that happened in late summer, and then, or late summer, early fall, and then it lasted a couple months. But when we went back to Key West that Christmas, which would have probably been about a month after it was all over, it was Key West, which used to be a pretty fun place, was like an army base. There were soldiers everywhere and tents, and it was an encampment, and that was me really realizing, what
Yeah.
that it was real,
Mm-hmm.
something could have really happened.
Yeah. I remember we talked about the drills and stuff in
Yeah,
school. I remember
yeah.
on one of my quizzes we had an essay question about stuff that they did to prepare back then, comparing it to what we do now. We
Yeah.
talked about the difference between those kind of drills and how we do lockdown drills and tornado drills
So
and
I
stuff.
remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to do with that Cuban Missile Crisis? No?
No.
My dad followed it really close a little
Mhm.
bit. Just didn't have a lot on TV back then, but
Yeah. Yeah, and now things travel so much faster. You find out immediately about things, but I feel like back
and then a few years later is when my family found, because we used to go on the east coast of Florida, when they found Marco Island, it was about 1965, 66, so it was just a few years later.
Mhm.
And that area down on the island, you probably haven't been there in a while, but where they have Cape Marco, the big high rises right in the corner down there. It used to be a Nike. It had silos. There was no roads there. There was no condos there. It had silos. So we found out several years later that was part of our preparation for the Cold War, is that that was a deserted island, basically, Marco Island was. And they had silos in the ground there that they had to, once they started building them, they had to dismantle them all. But they were all underground, and they were all aimed at at Cuba. So
Really?
that was another thing that made it real.
Yeah. I also forgot to. One of the questions is just like stating like where were you growing up at the time during this?
Growing up in Michigan, but
you traveled.
going
You were
to
in Florida a lot, yeah.
A couple times a
Mhm.
year usually.
Yeah.
Started out on the East Coast and then moved to the West Coast and then sometimes in the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and during the Cold War, because, well, then, the United States led an attack on Cuba, the Bay of Pigs invasion,
Mm-hmm.
which was a disaster.
Yeah.
So, it was, and then the Cuban refugees trying to get into our country. So there was, by having that contact with Florida all the time, there's probably a lot more going on in Florida than there ever was in
Yeah.
Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sure.
we knew more about what was really going on,
Yeah.
even though we were still pretty young.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I feel like what you talked about covered some of these. Some are just like, what was it like to live and experience for yourself the events that took place during the Cold War, which I'm talking about. How did you react to these events, or how did your parents react to them? What do you remember seeing or reading in the news about the Cold War?
And they put the Berlin Wall up, and you'd see people getting shot trying to get to the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
And, that was like,
Yeah.
that was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I was just telling Marie today that your step-grandfather, which is my father, never had to go to war and never had to fight or get drafted because he was too young for the First World War and too old for the Second World War. So he
right
was
over it.
right in between.
Yeah, and that's what the Cold War was all about, and everything was trying to keep communism away from our country, and not let the whole world go, because until after World War II there wasn't any communism, and then once Russia went communist, then you had the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War, which my husband was in the very last draft for the Vietnam War.
Really? That's what we just got done
The
talking
very
about.
last
with the
draft
Vietnam
where
War.
they pulled numbers, and it was just 1 year that you had to be in that draft, and if you didn't get called, then you were home free. Well, he had dropped out of college, and if you stayed in college, you weren't going to be in the draft.
Yeah, that
he
you
had
could
dropped out.
postpone it.
So he was in that last draft, and his number was like 183, and he ended up getting his draft notice on December 30th, like New Year's Eve, 31st, the last day of the year, and they took 187 numbers, and he was 183.
Wow.
So he won, and they, he went. Luckily, he got trained in finance because he had been in accounting in college, and the Army trained him in finance, and then the Army taught him the very first computer payroll system. So when he got sent to Germany, and when he got over there, their job was to change a manual payroll system into a computerized payroll system, but they were the only ones that knew anything about it, so their officers didn't know anything about it, and so it was a pretty cushy job. So we ended up we were going to wait till he was out of the service before we got married, but once we found out he was going to Germany, we got married and spent a year in Germany, and we were very close to the East German border there. We lived very close, like 20 minutes away maybe. And they even had a little mini base there that they had to, he didn't have to be a guard, but we were really close to it, and it was a little nerve-wracking at
Yeah.
times, and because you just never know what these people were going to do.
Yeah.
So that, you know, there was the Vietnam War, and that was a whole nother part of the Cold War.
Mhm.
What else?
I never had to go in the. I didn't get drafted because my feet were so bad. But my brother was in. My older brother was in the Navy, and my middle brother was in the Army. So,
Yeah.
the family was represented.
Mhm. Yeah. That's cool. Mm-mm. What else?
What else?
Let's see.
I guess, you know, when the Berlin Wall came down, we all thought the Cold War would pretty much be over, and, you know, Russia would become a kind of a normal country. But
Mhm.
as we can tell today,
Yeah.
they're probably worse than they were back then.
Yeah. Mm. What else do we got here? Let's see. Yeah, do you remember the Berlin Wall coming down? How do you think future generations will remember the Cold War? What lessons should students today take away from the Cold War?
Well, I thought of one more thing. When I was in college, I spent a summer on a Greek ship in the Mediterranean. It's called College at Sea.
Mm.
And there was 3 colleges on board. Western Michigan, Albion College, and I think maybe Indiana University. And we had our professors. We had classes in the morning when we were at sea, and then when we get on land, it was ancient history that I was in. And that was the summer that 1969, that America went to the moon. And so we had very limited information, because, you know, you didn't have internet, you didn't have, we were out in the middle of the Mediterranean, and even when we got to a country, we didn't understand the language, you know. So anyhow, there was the other half of the ship was French people who were a little hard to get along with, and there was a problem during that moon launch. I don't remember exactly what the problem was, but the French kept telling us that the Russians were going to shoot it down. They weren't going to let us be on the moon. So that was another kind of real Cold War thing.
Yeah.
Too, when you're in those foreign lands and you're an American, and things are going wrong and you can't get any information, and the countries that don't like you are, you know, instigating a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had several Cold War experiences that have stayed with me all these years, because I'm going to be 75 this year. So, you know, it's been a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how much this country's changed in all those years.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to go to Vietnam.
I went down to the draft board to make sure.
Well, then we had you're gonna do racial stuff in another thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that another time.
Mm-hmm.
Cold War.
Yeah, let's see what else. there's questions about like just certain like what historic events or people do you remember, like Berlin Wall, Cuba, you talked about those, McCarthy, Kennedy, some people.
Yeah, so Kennedy was president during the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing was with Kennedy's assassination. That was an American that went to Russia, and that was a big thing because to this day nobody really knows what happened and all that.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
there certainly was no trust.
Yeah.
You never knew what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that was all in the 60s, 70s.
Everybody sure remembers where they were at when Kennedy got
Yeah.
shot.
I was in the 6th or 7th grade.
Oh, that's right.
You were out of school
Yeah,
already.
I was in college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. What is your position today on nuclear arms race, or do you think a nuclear war is still possible?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
More countries that get that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had someone come, like a former student come in and talk about, he works, like, not directly with nuclear bombs, but, like, in that field. And he was talking about, like, how many nuclear bombs, like, different countries have and how, like, it's still going on today and stuff, which was interesting. Because, like, I was like, I just didn't really know about any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they have so many other ways to devastate our economy with computer hacking and EPS. It's where they do a nuclear explosion in the low atmosphere, and it zaps everything electronic. Everything electronic.
That's crazy.
Thought.
Yeah.
I mean,
that'd be a big deal.
That just changes would just change everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy.
That's another, I mean, there's a lot more than just a nuclear war.
Yeah.
Because like this war in Gaza, it's going on. That should have just been a quick thing that they could have just got over quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, some of the other ones they've had, but when they draw it out like that, but a nuclear war wouldn't be drawn out. It would be, we'd all be gone, or half of us would be gone, or, but they have other ways that they can hurt us, with all this hacking going on.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's scarier, where they can take down the electrical grid for a whole city.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We've seen that happen. So there's a lot of
still
things out there.
Yeah.
Makes me glad I'm old. You and your generation have to deal with it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like got some pretty good stuff for this first
If I
one.
can think of anything else. But, those were the ones that impressed me
Yeah.
the most, was the Cuban Missile Crisis and
Mhm.
the Berlin Wall coming down and
Yeah.
the moon shot,
Mm-hmm.
because I was in foreign countries.
Yeah.
And
Okay.